He's joined, Kamlesh and Panna then.
Okay.
Hello, Deviner. I can see you on the front, on the top.
Yeah, yeah. The Kamlesh is there as well. And Panna Ben. I can't see Panna Ben. But I think they're going to make you a host so that you can share your slides.
Excellent.
A co-host, sorry.
I have done
You are
it.
a co-host now, so you should be able to share your slides.
Did you get that access, Dr. Grimes?
I did. Yeah, everything's all right.
Fantastic.
We're all ready to go.
We're all ready to go. We've got a lot of people on the line. Are they? This topic is sort of excited people.
I'm glad to hear it.
Unlock the power of vitamin D was our headline. So I think
Yeah.
we captured the audience. We've got a good number on already. Let me do some sort of introductions and a bit of housekeeping, and then I'll sort of hand over to you, Dr. Grimes.
Yeah.
Welcome all. Thank you all for joining Gujarati Arya Association's Health and Wellbeing webinars.
Yep.
I'm Kamlesh Farah for those of you that don't know me. I was introduced to Dr. Grimes a few days ago, actually, and fascinated by his topic of vitamin D, how important it is. Looked up Dr. Grimes and found that he used to be a consultant physician at the East Lancashire Hospital Trust, now retired but still actively involved in the medical field, and read that he's a leading expert on vitamin D in the UK. And that fascinated me as to why someone would continue to get their research and education on vitamin D. Read a bit further that he's had a lot of medical papers written on this topic. And post-COVID was co-author of a book, which in the heading was Vitamin D Deficiency and COVID-19. And what we're going to learn today, and I'll open up to Dr. Grimes to give a bit more background on himself, is vitamin D affects us not only with our immune system, but there's lots of other knock-on effects. And I really want Dr. Grimes to talk us through his research, what he has come across, and what advice he can give us. And I themed it a little bit to talk about what is vitamin D, how do we receive it, what's deficiency, what does deficiency mean in vitamin D? But I think through the conversation, Dr. Grimes is going to cover all these topics. And I really want us to be interactive. So feel free to ask questions. You can do it one of two ways. Raise your hand or put your question into the chat. And we can take it from there. We'll cover as many questions as we can. We're on for an hour, but I suspect we may go a little bit over. So fasten your seatbelts, and Dr. Grimes, I'll hand over to you to do your introductions, please.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my introduction has been done. My name is David Grimes, and I've been involved in clinical medicine for many, many years, and vitamin D research for about 30 years or thereabouts. I actually produced another book, a big book called Cholesterol and Vitamin D, The Importance of the Sun. And that was published 15 years ago. It's out of print now, but if anyone would like a copy of the book, I can send them a PDF only. There are no printed copies available. I can send PDFs you will have access to my email account. I hope you'll be able to obtain it anyway if you want it. So I'm not going to go through the biochemistry of vitamin D. I'm going to go through the end result of it to emphasize its immense importance. So let us make a start. Here we go. The title of my talk is really, I decided, why are so many people now living for 100 years? And this was a graph I saw in New Scientist about 3 months ago. And I thought to myself, well, they haven't given the answer to it. They posed the question, why are so many people now living for 100 years? But they've not actually given the answer. So I'm going to give you the answer. Now, at birth, we are programmed to live for about 100 years, between 90 and 100, basically, because only 1 in 1,000 people aged 100 live to the age of 110. So 110 is unusual, but 100 is very increasingly common. And in the 90s is very common indeed. So a good long life. Now, what it is, when we're born, we're given about 100 units of life force. Now, these are hypothetical units. They're not real units. They're actually measures of mitochondrial activity, I think it's true to say. We're given 100 units of life force. On an average, we lose 1 unit a year. And when we get to age 100, we've no units of life force left. Life force vitality, it's all gone. It's used up. And we conk out. We die from old age. It's like a car conks out when it runs out of petrol or diesel or electricity. We run out of it when we run out of, when our engine stops working, basically. Now, in the 1950s, it looked a bit like this. People actually reached their maximum strength at about the age of 20. That's when the athletes are at their best. That's when the footballers are at their best. And this is when having a baby is actually at its best and safest at about the age of 20. And thereafter, we decline. And in 1950, we're nearly all dead by the age of 85. By the age of 2000, it was better, and we retained our vitality for longer. And so we still declined, but a lot of us got to the age of 100. Now, this person will say, never gets to 100 units of vitality, only gets to 80, a bit weak from the start. Health declines progressively, and death occurs about the age of 60. It's a sad life with illness throughout life and an early death. Then we get a good young life in this person, gets over 100, in fact, units of life force, gets to the age of 65, really happy, and dies suddenly. That's like a heart attack, sudden death at the age of 65. And that's been very, very common during the past 50 years or so. And then we get this tragedy. A young person full of vitality and life force dies suddenly at the age of 25. Well, that is sudden death. And the major cause of sudden death in young men in particular, is warfare. And it's terrible. In the 20th century, there was a great deal of warfare and a great deal of young deaths. We'll come back to that shortly. And then we get someone who lives longer and dies suddenly at the age of 75. Sudden death. That's probably a heart attack or a stroke, something of that sort. So these are the life patterns. What we want to see is how we can get to 100 and maintaining life force. And we can do that if we have plenty of vitamin D in our bodies. And we need a blood vitamin D level of between 40 and 60 nanomoles per litre. I'm sorry,
So,
that's
Dr.
wrong.
Grimes, do you have the slides? Are you sure? Are you sharing some slides?
I'm trying to, yes. Are you not seeing them?
No, you need to do the share screen. Sorry.
Right then. One minute.
Are we recording this?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thanks. Sorry.
Let me just start again.
Yes, please. Well, I don't know. Do you want to start again or?
Just if you can share your slides and just continue from where you left off. So we talked about warfare and the early deaths,
Okay,
and we got
I'll whiz
to
through them quickly.
perfect.
Okay. Now, where does it say share slides?
We can't. Yeah, at the just between the reactions at the bottom.
Share.
Yeah, that's it. Lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
There we
So
go.
can you see that now?
Brilliant. Yes, lovely. Thank you.
Well, that's where I said we're born with a life force of 100 units, and I've lost it again. Here we are. We're born with 100 units of life force. I'm not doing very well here. Let me minimize that. Minimize that. Yeah. We're born with 100 units of life force and we use them all up by the age of 100. And then we conk out and we die. That's hypothetical. That's an approximation. It's an average, but it doesn't work like that. And I mentioned that in 1950, we tended to die fairly young compared to today. And most people were dead by the age of 85. By the age of 2000, people live longer, and people living to the age of 100. And then we get somebody who has illness, keeps the life force down, illness, and dies at the age of 60 or thereabouts. Then we get somebody who's young and very good health and dies suddenly at the age of 65. And that's probably from a heart attack. And then we get someone who's 25 and dies suddenly. And that's a sudden death associated mainly with warfare. And then we get an elderly person dies suddenly at 75, doing very well in life, and suddenly 75 drops dead or dies suddenly from a stroke or a heart attack. What we're looking for is this sort of pattern, though, where we are living a longer time, and that is when we have a good blood level of vitamin D. Now, there's a mistake on that slide, I'm afraid. It says 40 to 60 nanomoles per litre. It is 40 per 60 nanograms per mil, which is equivalent to 100 to 150 nanomoles per litre. And if you're watching in the UK, then we don't use the nanograms now, we use nanomoles. So have in your minds, or write down a bit of paper, vitamin D, 100 to 150 nanomoles per litre. And that's what you must aim at. And we'll come back to that. So we want to live a long time. We want to live in good health for as long as possible. Now, there's a study from Finland that my daughter brought to my attention only yesterday. And this has been a study of people who live to the age of 100. And what they have is inner peace. That's important. The people are curious and they're always wanting to learn and always learning. They also have communication with young people. Very important. Even more important, they have outdoor interests, gardening, walking, things like that. And they have good blood levels of vitamin D. That was in it. They appreciate small things, not big things. They're not flashy people. They're happy with a small car, not a great big car. They live life slowly, but they make the most of every moment they have in life. They love life, and they are not frightened of aging. They're not going for anti-aging treatments, etc. They're happy with what they are. And these are the characteristics of the people who live to 100 in Finland. The vitamin D is important in Finland because Finland is very far north and people need vitamin D supplements. And that's been a part of Finnish life for a long time. Now, let's look at what's been happening in this country. We're starting at 1980. I'm going to come back to another slide going back to 1950. But this is the number of centenarians, people surviving to the age of 100 in the UK. At the end of 1980, at the end of 1985, etc. The points are the end of the decades. And then we can see we're doing well in 2015. But at the age of 2020, we've dropped a lot. Now, you know what that's due to, don't you? That's due to the pandemic of COVID-19 during 2020. Started off in January 2020, and that knocked it down. But the recovery has taken place, and by 2023, we got back to where we were almost. And the number of centenarians is continuing to rise now. Now, let's think about COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. And they had a lot of people dying. And the people who died, the excess deaths, were in these three subgroups: the elderly, the obese, and the ethnic Black African and South Asian members of the community. And all these three groups are well known to be vitamin D deficient. No question about it. Now, to go into this further, let's look at COVID-19 deaths in doctors of all ages. And I'm taking this data from the British Medical Journal, from the obituaries, and there are about 25 in each group. Now, of the ethnic white doctors who died, the average age at death was 91. Of the ethnic Black African and South Asian doctors who died, the average age at death was 62. This means that the ethnic Black African and South Asian doctors are dying 30 years earlier than they should do. And that's been noted in other studies. This difference is staggering, absolutely amazing. So we're going to say, well, why is it? What's happening? This shows it again. And we have the white, these are the these are the doctors, sorry, 25 altogether. These are the doctors, and these are the ages of death. Each blue vertical line represents one doctor who died from COVID-19, whether he was working or not. And we can see there the white ethnic average was 91, with a range of deaths from 83 to 103, whereas the Black African Southeast Asian, where the age range was from 50 to 77, average 62. This is terrible. It's enormous. This I can't really publicize this, only by occasions such as today. But this information is not available. The information cannot be obtained from official national data because ethnicity is not recorded as part of death statistics. They say, well, if we put ethnicity on the forms, that's a form of racism. It isn't a form of racism. Racism is ignoring the health disadvantages of ethnic minorities. That's racism, if ever was racism. But this is ignored. This information is known by the medical leaders, the ethnic minority medical leaders of the medical profession know this, and they certainly take vitamin D, but they do not advertise it. They don't tell everybody else. It's terrible. Now, all ethnic Black African and South Asian people living in the US, in the UK, will be seriously deficient in vitamin D. It's known, it's true, well established. The point is that melanin is a dark skin pigment. It blocks ultraviolet light and reduces vitamin D production. The point is that we produce in our skin an oil called 78C, and ultraviolet light from the sun acting on the skin converts it into vitamin D. Got it? Vitamin D is produced by the action of ultraviolet light on the skin. Now, when there's a lot of melanin in the skin, the UV won't penetrate, and vitamin D isn't produced. It's the same with sunblock creams that are put on children. They stop vitamin D production, and they're overused. Vitamin D is so vitally important. Now, I'll show you something else. This goes from my research 30 years ago. Now, there's a grey shaded area at the bottom, high at the left, low on the right. That's made up of 1,500 vertical black lines, each one representing one person. We can see the middle of the range there. That's the vertical orange arrow is the middle of the range. And that shows that half the people described here have a blood vitamin D level less than 10. Below that level, below that yellow line, is serious vitamin D deficiency, very serious. Below the red line on 30 nanograms per mil is, or 75 nanomils per litre, that is vitamin D deficiency. So you can see how few ethnic minority people were deficient in vitamin D. Now, the ideal level is in the yellow, between 40 and 60 nanograms per mil, between 100 and 150 nanomoles per litre. I'm sorry about these 2 units, but that's the way it is. And we can see there are only 2 or 3 people in that ideal range, as in the green rectangle. See, hardly anyone got to the ideal range in the yellow. This is very, very serious vitamin D deficiency. This is a very serious public health problem. So here I've got it again. The ideal blood levels, and you must write this down, and you must go to your family doctors and say, I'm told that I'm likely to be vitamin D deficient. I'd like you to check my blood level, please. And you're wanting an ideal blood level of 100 to 150 nanomoles per litre. In the United States, they're still using the 40 to 60 nanograms per mil. But in the UK, it's 100 to 150 nanomoles per litre these days. And you need to ask this. You need to find out if you're vitamin D deficient. You almost certainly are. But even if you start taking vitamin D, you need to find out if you're achieving that level. You need to take usually about 4,000 units each day. Now, they might tell you to take 400 units. 400 units is a baby dose, quite honestly. So you don't worry about 400 units. It's 4,000 units each day you're wanting to take. And that is perfectly safe and it's lifelong. You don't take it for a few weeks and then if you finish your course of treatment. It's not like that. This is a long-term supplement. Start off with 4,000 units each day and then get your blood level checked after about 3 months and see what you've achieved. See if you got into the ideal range, because that's what you need to do. Now, I mentioned, why are so many people living now to the age of 100, as we saw on the graph earlier on? Well, the starting point is having a good blood level of vitamin D. The second point, of course, is having a nice, peaceful life and a love of learning and outdoor activities. And this is what we've already seen. Now, had we not had the COVID pandemic in 2020, the number of centenarians would have gone up even more along this line. Centenarians are mainly women. Women live longer than men. I don't know if it's biological. It could be that men are just stupid. And I think probably it is because men are stupid and women are much more sensible. And that's why they live longer. Ethnicity is not recorded in the centenarians. But as you can see from the ages of death of doctors from COVID-19, ethnicity was noted there. And it looks as though people of ethnic minorities are not going to reach the age of 100 unless they take vitamin D. Now, this is worldwide. This is the number of people worldwide living for 100 or more years. This was in New Scientist. Starts in 1950, and it went down a bit to 1970, but then it started going up in a big way from 1970 onwards. And look at that, for 2020, the number's just going up. It's doubling every year, almost. An exponential increase. And that's wonderful. It's wonderful apart from 2 things. When people are approaching 100, they do become infirm and a bit frail. And they are increasingly taken to hospital. And we can see them in the hospital, on the corridors of the hospital. And the poor souls are really waiting to die, but they're whisked into hospital rather than dying peacefully at home. The other problem with living so long is that they draw their pensions for a long time. Not long ago, people would retire at the age of 65, die by the age of 75, and they receive a pension for only 10 years. But now people retire at 65, and they die at the age of retire at the age of 65, retire at 85 or 95, and they're drawing a pension for so much longer. And this has a huge economic impact on pensions. But that's not our concern. That's the politics. That's politics. That's a government's problem. What we want to do is try and live to the age of 100 if we can, and keeping well at that. Now, from 1950 to 1970, we saw the number of centenarians was reducing slightly, not very many, but from 1970 to 2020, it increased enormously, exponentially. And there it is again, staggering. Not many people know this. And as I said before, when people get to 100, they die from what's called old age. They conk out because they've run out of mitochondrial activity, out of life force. Now, between 1970 and 2020, people stopped dying. They were living much longer. If they were living, it meant they were not dying. Well, what was that all about? What were they not dying from? People said, well, it's medical advances. What do you mean, medical advances? Hip replacements keep people mobile but not alive. But what happened after 1970? Now, I'm going to look at this, deaths of doctors, obituaries, British Medical Journal. I'm obsessive about obtaining information, and it's there in the British Medical Journal, but not everybody reads it. And I record the deaths of doctors, the ages and causes of death every week in the British Medical Journal. I have done for several years. Now let's look at this, 2024. In 2024, there were a total of 205 doctors' deaths were reported in which the cause of death was given, and they are given in the British Medical Journal almost always. Now we can see that the main cause of death was cancer. We can see that the next common cause of death was old age. The next one was brain disease, and that's mainly dementias, also strokes, but mainly dementias, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. Apart from that, there's nothing very striking. We got a moderate number died of infections and a moderate number of heart deaths. Now, this is the important thing, because heart deaths, we're always told that the major cause of death in the so-called Western world is heart deaths. Well, it isn't. It was in 1970, but it's not in 2024. Heart deaths have gone down enormously. We could halve that number of heart deaths by giving vitamin D in a controlled way to make sure that a blood level of 100 nanomoles per litre was achieved. And that was published only this week from a conference in the United States, research done in Salt Lake City. It's been in the newspapers actually today. But heart deaths could be knocked down by vitamin D. Infection, well, that's what vitamin D does really. It deals with infection. It boosts immunity. And it boosts immunity, it reduces the deaths from infection, like, for example, from COVID-19 or from other infections. Now, we've got cancers there. There's a huge amount of evidence that vitamin D can reduce cancer deaths, can prevent cancers and reduce cancer deaths. So, with a bit of luck, we can knock down those cancer deaths. Brain problems, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's. There's also a lot of evidence that vitamin D deficiency is a major factor in these brain diseases that become fatal. So let's knock those down as well a bit. And as we knock down cancer deaths and brain deaths and heart deaths and infections, we're going to find old age deaths will go up because these people will live to old age. So we can see it's going to be interesting to see what happens and to see what happens if we were to use vitamin D in a widespread way. I was just watching a YouTube of John Campbell just earlier this evening, and he was using ivermectin, reports of ivermectin having a major effect on cancer deaths. Good. Now, the government doesn't like us using ivermectin, and the government does not like us using vitamin D either, for reasons which we can only guess about. But it's very sad. But you can see there, heart deaths have gone right down. And that's the main thing that's caused old age deaths to increase. Now, in the Guardian obituaries, which I read every day, most people seem to die over the age of 90. I presume from old age, but it doesn't actually say. But also in the obituaries in the Guardian, we find out that once again, cancer deaths are major. The major cause of death is cancer. Brain deaths again are second there, heart, and then sudden deaths. In the obituaries in the Guardian, people don't die from old age. If somebody says they died at the age of whatever, 93, but he doesn't say what from, we can only guess. Because coroners do not like to record old age as a cause of death, which is absurd. The whole purpose of medicine is to enable people to die from old age rather than from disease. We don't want people to die from cancer. We don't want them to die from brain disease or heart disease or sudden death. We want them to keep going on until they conk out, and that's called old age. Now, before 1970, what was going on then? Well, what we know is from Dr. Maurice Campbell was a very, very well-respected cardiologist from Guy's Hospital during the 20th century. And he was like me, he was obsessive, even more obsessive than I am, in finding information, data. And he looked at the deaths in England and Wales from two periods of time, 1876, 1929, and 1929 to 1959. And that's when his research stopped at that point. What he found out between 1876 and 1910, the number of deaths went down. We were living longer. After 1910, the number of deaths would have shot up with the First World War, but we won't bother about that for now. The point is that heart deaths were few and they were steady. The heart deaths were mainly rheumatic heart disease and syphilitic heart disease from the nasty sexually transmitted disease, syphilis, which damaged the heart in a big way. So now we go 1922, he skipped the First World War, 1922, and we find out heart deaths are increasing, but only after 1926. It's pretty steady. And then in 1920, suddenly we had a leap from 1920 to 27. Then it's going up again in the late 1920s. The valvular heart disease, won't bother about that. And here we have it again. These are the heart deaths. Few in number. Look at that, number 5. 5 deaths per 100,000 per year. We're going to see it, the deaths. We're going to see 500 deaths per 100,000 per year shortly. That's when we get to 1970 or 1960. What we can see is a big change in 1926. There's a new disease appeared, causing a lot of heart deaths. Now, the new disease was what is generally called coronary heart disease, also called coronary artery disease. Myocardial infarction is a sudden event causing death, same as heart attack. Angina is just troublesome, not fatal. But this was a disease of blockage of the heart, of the arteries in the heart. So we have the heart, and on the outside of the heart are a series of arteries which take blood to the heart muscle. And we can see the yellow bits are where the heart is, the arteries are narrowed. And they're narrowed, and when they get narrow, they start causing angina, chest pain on exertion. And when they block up completely, they cause a heart attack, severe pain, and perhaps sudden death. We're dealing with this new disease of coronary artery disease, coronary heart disease. And here we have it coming up now. All heart deaths going up, but we've got the sudden appearance of the coronary heart disease. But at that time, in the 1930s, people didn't understand what was going on. And so this dark line should be higher up, really, because that was the major cause of heart deaths. And here we have it from 1941 onwards. This is when people started to understand it. So we're on 50. Before we're on 5, coronary artery disease, that says, coronary heart disease in present terminology, and it's going to go up to 500. And it's going up steadily now from 5 in 1926 up to this level. And here we are, coronary heart disease, coronary artery disease, or deaths, heart deaths. Going up again. And this is very clearly a very serious epidemic. But nobody knew it was going to happen. No one realised that it was an epidemic. So if we continue in Maurice Campbell's work, we can see 1960, we've got 500 deaths. In 1930, we had 50. In 1930, we had 50 deaths per 100,000. And now we've got 10 times as many. 500 deaths per 100,000. This is staggering. But, you know, I was around in I wasn't around really until 1970 as a doctor. We'll look at that in a moment. But people didn't realise what was going on. Because earlier in the century, medicine, politics were all concerned about two very serious world wars. And they weren't really worried about what was going on in hospitals and why people were dying. Now, we're going back now to 1960. And we're going to say, what was going to happen after 1960? And this was from Maurice Campbell's work. And we thought, well, is it going to go on like this? Are we going to get 4,000 deaths per 100,000? Well, that would have been an absolute catastrophe. And things like that don't really happen. So we didn't get that bad. What happened after 1960 was this. This is 1960, we can see, where it's 500 deaths per 100,000 a year. And then it starts to level off. And in 1970, when I was working in the Manchester Royal Infirmary as resident medical officer, dealing with all the medical emergencies, it was a very serious problem. But it was starting to level off. 550 deaths per 100,000. In Scotland, it was 650 per 100,000. But 550 per 100,000. Things were so bad that in 1970, we had to invent coronary care units. There were no coronary care units before 1970. No resuscitation, no coronary care units. It just wasn't happening. So there's a new emergency. So what would happen after 1970? Well, it could have leveled off like this. That would have been a big, serious problem to maintain 550 deaths per 100,000 per year for so many years up to the present time. So did that happen? Well, no, it didn't. What did happen after 1970 was the number of deaths suddenly dropped. They dropped even quicker than they started. And so that by 2010, we were down to the same numbers in 1930, basically. It had come down enormously. We must ask ourselves why it came down, and we'll come back to that. But it did come down to a very low level, back to 1930s level. And it's still pointing downwards. And here we have it here. These are in the nations of the United Kingdom. We have the highest one. The highest one's in Northern Ireland and Scotland. And then we have the black is the average. And then we have England and Wales and the lower ones. So if people didn't die in that time, well, what this shows is if we continued with deaths at the level of 550 per 100,000, we'd have had an enormous number of deaths. And we can calculate that from this graph. Now, 1970, there were 550 deaths per 100,000, which equals 5,500 deaths per million. The population of England and Wales was 60 million. And if we multiply 5,500 by 60, we finish up with 330,000 deaths per year. That's an awful lot. Now, that's in 1 year. Now, if we look at the time period between 1970 and 2010, That's 40 years. We multiply the 330,000 by 40, and we finish it with 13,300,000 people who could have died during that period of time. And here we have it. Now, there's 13 million people in that graph, in that square, that rectangle. More people didn't die in that rectangle than did die. And it's about 3 million people died below the line, and 8 million people did not die above the solid line. So now we're finding out why we have so many older people now, why people are dying, are surviving to 100, because they're not dying from coronary heart disease. It's virtually gone. And that's 8 million, but 8 million people did not die from coronary heart disease during 1970 to 2010. There we are. 8 million deaths did not happen. 8 million is an awful lot of people who didn't die. Now, if you take the decade, 2010 to 2020, again, if we take that 1970s level of 5,500 deaths per million, if we now multiply that by 10 for the 10 years 2010 to 2020, there are now another 3.5 million did not die from coronary heart disease up to the present time. So in other words, 11 million people did not die from coronary heart disease during 5 decades. Well, they became the foundation of the remarkable number of centenarians in 2010 and 2020. More and more people living beyond retirement age. And here we have it. We've got from 1970. The blue line shows the declining number of people not dying. So the number of people dying from heart disease going right down. And as it goes down, number of people living to the age of 100 goes up. It's quite simple. Same thing happened in the United States. This is the book that described it all. And here we see disease of coronary arteries going up steadily compared to 1911 to 1915, going up very high in the 1930s. And there we get the pandemic from 1940 to 2000, showing more men died than women. Again, we get that epidemic appearance. Also described in Canada, Western Europe, Australia, misspelled, New Zealand, Central America, South America. But the data are nowhere near as good as in the United Kingdom. So why did all this happen? Now, we've got to look at the non-causes. We've got to think about why the pandemic of coronary heart disease occurred at all. Cigarette smoking. No. Most people dying of coronary heart disease do not smoke. People, if you smoke, it increases the risk, but cigarette smoking is not the answer. Male sex, well, more men than women die from coronary heart disease. Diabetes increases the risk. Obesity increases the risk. No, it doesn't actually. Well, we'll see about obesity in a few minutes. And diet, there is no dietary explanation of either the increased deaths from coronary heart disease or the decline of deaths from coronary heart disease. These are the risks of coronary heart disease. The main risk of dying from coronary heart disease is having already had a heart attack, previous MI. That's by far the major risk of coronary heart disease. Smoking, yes, doubles the risk. Diabetes doubles the risk. Inactivity doubles the risk. Unemployment increases the risk. High blood pressure, only a little bit. Alcohol, not significant. Cholesterol, not significant. Weight, not significant. Note cholesterol. We have an obsession with cholesterol as a cause of heart disease. It is not true. It is propaganda to make us take statin drugs. We're locked into cholesterol, and it's just ridiculous. The evidence is simply not there. The evidence is that cholesterol is without any effect on life expectancy and cardiac health, heart health. So forget about cholesterol. Bit of alcohol, don't worry about that. Bit overweight, don't worry. Gross obesity is different. Certainly don't smoke. Diabetes is interesting because diabetes shows a very common, or it's common in people of South Asian ethnicity in a big way. Huge number of people of South Asian ethnicity, disproportionate amount of diabetes. There comes in vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D deficiency is very strongly linked to diabetes. Inactivity means sitting in front of the television all day long, basically. And unemployment is basically the same. The unemployed do not get much outdoor activity. And inactive means indoor inactivity. You've got to be active to get out of doors. I feel a bit sorry for people, I must say, who live in terraced houses which don't have a garden. There might be parks nearby, but the parks are not what they used to be, and there might not be safe places to go into. I know that part of my research was looking at people who did have and didn't have gardens. And the ones who did have gardens had higher vitamin D levels than those who didn't have gardens. So we have a big problem in the inactive, unemployed in this country in terms of health, as well as in those of South Asian ethnicity, people with dark skins. Let's look at military veterans in the United States. There were 3 wars in the second half of the 20th century. War in Korea, war in Vietnam, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which followed closely upon each other. This shows us arteries on the heart arteries. And on the top, we get mild disease. We can see something happening on the inside of the arterial wall. And further down, we get the severe disease. And at the bottom, we have what becomes fatal disease when there's a blood clot on top of the narrowing. So we're going to see this severe and mild. Now, let's look at the Korean War again, in particular. When soldiers in the army, the US Army, are killed in action, die in action, they all have an autopsy. And the autopsy is a standard autopsy. And it looked also at the presence of heart disease. And in the Korean War in the 1950s, we found that just under 80% of these young soldiers, and these are young men in the 20s, 80% had the evidence of coronary heart disease. That means in a mild form usually. And nearly 20% had severe disease. Severe disease at the age of, in the 20s, was terrible. And these people, these men, would have died in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They would have died young. They would have contributed to the increase in the number of deaths from coronary heart disease. Let's look what happened in the Vietnam War. Same principle. Vietnam War. The number of soldiers at autopsy with evidence of coronary heart disease had fallen by almost half. The same with those with severe disease. In the 1970s, there was a huge decline in coronary heart disease compared to the 1950s. Unexplained. And if we go to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars in the 1990s and just past 2000, we find it gone down to close on zero. Only 10% had evidence of coronary heart disease and only 2% had severe disease. For it to go from 80% to 8% as it was, 80% to 10%. It's just staggering in the course of 50 years. This was nothing to do with any medical intervention. This was nature taking its course. The point is that when people die from heart disease, they die from, we only see what's going on the outside, really. But these young men, we saw what's going on the inside. This is the diagnosis of the real disease. This was a paper describing all this. It's all published. It's not secret. I'm not making it up. And Professor Rothstein says the emergence of the pandemic of coronary heart disease did not receive the attention that it deserved. It didn't. Nobody took any notice of it. People were unaware of it. The experts' fatalist acceptance of coronary heart disease as a result of lifestyles in modern societies, and you know very well, it's all put down, coronary heart disease is all put down to lifestyle, when it's not due to lifestyle. The result of lifestyles in modern societies. And this produced amazement and confusion among them. When coronary heart disease mortality rates began to decrease steadily and substantially in the 1970s and 1980s in the United States and other advanced countries. Now, beyond the 1980s, it went down even more, as we've seen. And here we have it from the United States. We see coronary heart disease reaching its peak about in 1965. We look at stroke deaths going down very substantially during the course of the second half of the 20th century, and high blood pressure deaths as well going down. Things were getting better. There is still some heart disease, but it's very low risk. The pandemic that we've seen is a high mortality coronary heart disease. These are deaths we've been looking at. And if we look at the chance of dying after a heart attack, you know, I was with a chap yesterday who'd had a heart attack and looks fine now. He in hospital, came out of hospital, no problem. Well, if we look at people, blue is people under the age of 65 and green is over 65. And in 1970, say when I was at the sharp end of emergency care in the Manchester Royal Infirmary, about 40%, just under 40% of people having a heart attack died in hospital. And that's gone down, not 2010, to about 8%. It's gone right down. In the younger ones, and in the older ones. We can look here. These are the age of deaths of men. Interesting to note, the first column, this in the first year of life. Look how a lot of young boys die in the first year of life. In 1968. Whereas in green is 2010. This has been an amazing success rate, is reduction of neonatal and early infant deaths. Staggering reduction there, which is so good to see. And then we can see that as we go through life, we get into in the 1960s, say, in here, a lot of men were dying in the 1960s, so dying in their 60s, in the 1960s, but by the 2010, very few were dying. And if we look at age 85, a huge increase in men dying over the age of 85. Wonderful.
Dr. Grimes, can I just pause you for a minute?
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, and the session's booked in for an hour. We can go over, it's not a problem. Can you give us an idea as to how much more longer you're going to be talking about this in terms of presentation wise? And then we wanted to touch upon vitamin D as well. So,
okay.
As to how much time you need?
Well, what I can do now, yeah, we're nearly finished actually.
Okay, no, continue on then. That's fine.
We can look at women. We've got neonatal deaths, early infant deaths in women. Fewer baby girls die than baby boys. We can see once again, living longer. The gold is where they die. So what I just wanted to say then was, what was the cause? And if we look at this, what was the cause of the increase? Was it food? Well, what dietary change took place? And then when it goes down, what dietary change took place then? And the one thing that impresses me is this era, after 1970, is the era of fast food. Well, we can't say that fast food causes us to die from heart disease, can we? If heart disease has been going down so substantially during the era of fast food, and this is all about nature. The cause of it is almost certainly a microorganism, like most pandemics. Appearance of a new microorganism about 1910, causing disease in the 1950s, and then decline of disease with the development of herd immunity. Now, if it's an infection, this tells us why it would be suppressed by vitamin D. And if we'd been giving people vitamin D, getting the blood levels up, and don't forget, during this era was in this country a serious atmospheric pollution, and people got very little sunlight and sun exposure. Had we had good sun, vitamin D, this level would have been much lower indeed. But the pandemic was never investigated in depth. But the important thing is a high blood level of vitamin D provides protection. We can also see when it comes to statins, statins were introduced about 1995. And so they did not cause that drop. So that just takes me down this slide. The deaths from heart disease goes down, number of centenarians goes up. What we've got to do further to increase the number of centenarians is reduce deaths from cancer and reduce deaths from brain disease. And both of them are probably under major influence of vitamin D. Keep the blood level of vitamin D above 100 nanomoles per litre, and you stand a good chance of getting to the age of 100. Remember, 100 years of age, 100 nanomoles per litre of vitamin D. 200s. Okay, I will finish at that point.
Fantastic. There's a lot of information to digest. So interesting. Are you able to stop sharing your screen and we can take some questions on board?
Yes.
Brilliant.
So I finally have to do it. Good.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was very, very informative. A lot to digest. But let's take some questions. So you've talked about dosages of vitamin D that we should take. A question was asked: can you overdose on vitamin D?
The answer is yes, you can, but it is staggeringly rare. Staggeringly rare. If instead of taking 4,000 units a day, you were to take 4 million units a day, yeah, the overdosing of vitamin D is not dangerous. It increases the amount of calcium in the blood and in the urine. It's easily treated. So when you're taking vitamin D, if you have diabetes, you get your blood checked regularly. If you have hypertension, you get your blood pressure checked regularly. If you have an underactive thyroid, you get your thyroid checked regularly. All these things are monitored. If you have cancer of the prostate, you get your PSA measured regularly. If you're vitamin D deficient, you get your vitamin D level measured regularly. Your doctors are told not to do it. Just push them. Say, I think it's very important to have my blood vitamin D level measured to make sure that the blood level is in the right range of 100 to 150 nanomoles per litre. And if you take, you've got to monitor things, and they should check your vitamin D level and your calcium level. It only needs to be done once a year.
Yeah, and it's interesting. What one person raised a question, which is say they've tried to have asked their GP, their medical consultant, to test them for vitamin D, and they've sort of been declined. I mean, is that something that's coming out of GP surgeons that don't have the resources, or what can people do if they're being told no, we're not going to check it?
Well, they're told not to check it. I don't know who by, but they are told not to resist checking vitamin D levels. They're told it's expensive. It is not expensive. Mm-hmm. As you could see from my graph, I checked the blood levels of vitamin D of 1,500 South Asian ethnic people. It didn't cost anything, really. I used some research money to buy a piece of equipment, once we got the equipment, we could do as many as we liked. But you can do home testing kits for, I think, about £15, and they're actually good. Now, it says here £20. Just come up on the screen. Buy a home test kit, £20. Yeah,
The home testing kit is £20.
yeah,
Okay. And
that's okay.
that's good. And they're very easy to administer, I'm guessing,
Yeah,
home
they are.
testing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So interestingly, you talked about vitamin D is, provided by the sun on the skin. Someone's
yeah.
asked a question about UVA and UVB.
It's UVB.
It's UVB
UVB. Yeah.
uses vitamin D.
UVA is very low energy,
Right.
and UVB is high energy, and UVC is very, very high energy. But UVC does not get through the atmosphere.
Hmm.
The UV, 95% of UVB is blocked by the atmosphere. And if you're high on a mountain, you get more of it. You've got to be careful on a mountain. You get more, you can get more, you can get more vitamin D. You can get more UV than you want to when you're on a mountain. You've got to be very careful.
Yeah. Okay. And sticking to that reference, someone's asked the question, what is the difference between D3 and D2? Because they're taking D3
Yeah.
with A2, and I must admit I don't know what this means, but you might know.
Okay. Yeah. You're quite
D3, and maybe you
very,
need to
very
explain
simple.
that to the audience.
They convert into the same thing once they're in the body.
Right. Okay.
But D2 comes from fungi, mushrooms. They've got to be exposed to the ultraviolet light to release the vitamin D in them. So vitamin D2 comes from mushrooms. No plants produce vitamin D, no plants at all. Mushrooms, fungi are not plants really. And D3 is from an animal source. We get vitamin D3 from the oil that's washed out of sheep's wool. The sheep, mainly in Australia and New Zealand, the sheep, all the fleece of a sheep is all horrible and oily. So it has to be de-oiled. So it's washed with an organic solvent, xylene or toluene or something or other. And then the vitamin D is extracted from that. The animals aren't killed. The sheep aren't killed at all. There's no blood in them. It's just washing the wool, basically. And that's where we get the vitamin D3 from. But don't bother with D2.
Okay. Thank you. A question about the measure of vitamin D. You've mentioned nanomoles per
Yeah.
liter. You mentioned nanograms per milliliter. Someone's asked a question, which is we see the reference IUs
Oh,
as a
international units. Yeah.
yeah. Is
That's the
that
same thing. International unit. These
international?
units,
Yeah.
these units are by international agreement and standardization in the 1920s. 1 unit of vitamin D is the requirement of a 10-gram mouse by international standard agreement. Now, so you multiply up, and if you weigh 60 kilograms, 70 kilograms, you need a lot of 1 units. In fact, we now know that 1 unit of vitamin D weighs 26.6 billionths of a gram, which is too small to be seen, of course. But it couldn't be measured by weight, by mass in the 1920s. So it's best to avoid micrograms. Some people express it as micrograms. That's what leads to confusion. If you say that somebody should take 10 micrograms of vitamin D, well, most people have never heard of micrograms. We know about milligrams, but not micrograms. So what has happened in the past is people have confused micrograms and milligrams. Instead of taking 10 micrograms, take 10 milligrams, and that's how they get overdoses of vitamin D, getting the units mixed up. Keep to units, and it's safe.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's a lot of questions. I was going to invite this gentleman, George Moncrief, to sort of light up his video and ask some of the questions. You see,
I've
George,
seen that coming up.
can I invite you and George to ask some of your questions? You've got some great insights, and it would be nice to see you, and maybe you can
Yeah.
ask Dr. Grimes personally.
He did. I saw one coming up saying vitamin UVA reduces vitamin D in the skin.
Yes.
Well, it can. You cannot get an overdose of vitamin D by exposure to the sun because a surplus of vitamin D is destroyed by when it circulates through the skin by the action of UV, and I think that's the UVA destroys the surplus of vitamin D in the skin.
So that really brings me on to say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Um, Excellent presentation, David. Thank you so much. Fascinating. And I learned a lot. Really brilliant. I love your passion and enthusiasm. Really, should we be using sunblock in the winter then?
Sunblock?
To stop the UV, because at this time of year, we've only got UVA. There's no UVB, is there?
No UVB now.
Especially up in Scotland and places. So all we're getting is this damaging UVA. So this is the time of year I use sunblock.
Oh, I'm not sure the UVA is damaging.
Well, it's not. It's what releases nitric oxide, and that releases cyclic AMP, which lowers your blood pressure. So
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that, but my blood pressure happens to be quite low. So I'm
Yeah. No, I wouldn't recommend using. I wouldn't recommend using sunblock at all. When I use sunscreen, I only use it on my head.
Yes, because
As
that's
I'm
enough.
sure you do the same.
Work your life. Yes, expose the other bits of your body if you can bear it.
That's right. It's the only bit of our bodies that at the top of the head is exposed to the sun in a big way, and our nose as well, generally speaking. No, I wouldn't take. I wouldn't. No, I just take vitamin D in the winter.
Well,
Well,
why did our ancestors, when they migrated out of Central Africa somewhere between 70,000 and 120,000 years ago with black skin,
yeah.
Why, when they migrated to northern latitudes or southern latitudes, did they evolve to lose the ability to make eumelanin and instead make pheomelanin? That was an evolutionary drive, which is clearly to our advantage.
Yeah, it was. Yes, indeed. Well, you could say the people with dark skins had a survival disadvantage, and
Yeah.
so
Therefore, that tells me sunlight is doing us far more good than harm.
Yeah. Where did the white skin come from? The interesting thing is that gorillas have white skin.
But they've got,
No, well, they have black hair.
they don't need melanin because they've got hair.
No, they don't. That's right.
Now,
Yeah.
our ancestors 500,000 years ago were covered in hair.
Yeah, but I think that Neanderthal man had a white skin, pale skin.
Yeah, it was driven by folate deficiency, apparently.
Yeah.
Due to sunburn when there's a tremendous drought. I think 500,000 or 2 million years ago, many years ago. I don't remember it. And there was a drought which caused our ancestors to have to come out of the forests and into the direct, arid, dry, exposed lands. And they got terrible sunburn, and that caused folate deficiency. And so that caused the evolutionary drive to make eumelanin.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, George. We've got, is it Punna that's raised her hand? GAA London?
Yes, I did actually.
Yeah.
Welcome back, David. It's lovely to see you again. And I don't know if you remember me, but excellent session again, as always. I'd like to question you, saying, why does our need for vitamin D increases as we age?
Good question. I should have mentioned that. Well, what it is, I did mention very briefly that we produce in our skin an oil called 7-DHC, and the sun converts that into vitamin D. Now, when we get older, you're not old enough to notice it, but I am. Our skin becomes drier. The skin becomes dry with age. We no longer produce this oil, 7-DHC, in an adequate amount. And therefore, old people, and I'm one of them, I suppose, I'm 82, old people always going to be deficient in vitamin D. It doesn't matter how long we spend out in the sun, we're going to be deficient in vitamin D because we cannot produce the oil that gives rise to vitamin D. That's the issue. So all old people require to take vitamin D by mouth. Big need. No.
So how does vitamin D deficiency actually relate to chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart disease, or even low mood?
Well, there are metabolic reasons, clearly. But the only thing that I'm really aware of is the immune function of vitamin D. It switches on immunity. A lot of diseases that we have are due to microorganisms. Like I mentioned, heart disease. This is almost certainly due to a microorganism, probably Chlamydia pneumoniae. Doesn't really matter. And so with heart disease, vitamin D has a modulating effect. The epidemiology of heart disease is based on vitamin D, basically, with the elderly, with the South Asian immigrants, Black African immigrants, etc. See, South Asian immigrants, Black African man, South Asian man living in this country, in the UK, has a high risk of a lot of diseases we don't have in in Southeast Asia, in India, for example. There's a very good study in 1926, I think it was, in India, from a Glaswegian physician. He was looking at rickets, and he found out there was no, what he was investigating tuberculosis in India, and in Glasgow, the tuberculosis mainly in poor people, and he found out that in India, tuberculosis mainly in rich people, wealthy people, because they stayed indoors all the time. And the poor people are out in the fields, and they were fit and healthy. And the tuberculosis, he looked at the children of adults with tuberculosis, and the children had rickets, first sign of vitamin D deficiency. And that was, and he concluded it's due to lack of sunlight, being indoors all the time. And one in England, see, vitamin D deficiency is effectively a disease of industrialization. We don't work in the fields, we work in factories. We're educated in schools, we're indoors virtually all the time, in offices of work, in factories, in schools. So we just don't get the sun that otherwise we would do. That's a change of lifestyle.
So, is there a connection between vitamin D levels and immunity, especially after COVID-19?
Well, COVID-19 showed it clearly. The people who died from COVID-19 were the people who were deficient in vitamin D. That was shown very, very clearly in research done in Israel. And people who had good blood levels of vitamin D, they just had mild disease. They didn't die at all. It was so clear. There was a huge amount of research done during the pandemic of COVID-19 that the government just never acknowledged, basically, for some reason or other. We learned a huge amount about the benefits of vitamin D during the COVID-19 pandemic, but nobody bothered.
I know. Thank you again, Kamlesh. There are quite a lot, many more.
Yeah, there's a lot of
questions.
questions. Dr. Hans, I'm not sure if you've had your supper, but can we keep you for a bit longer?
Yeah, of course, you can keep as long as you like. Yeah.
So one of the questions asked was someone suffers from vitiligo.
Yeah, vitiligo.
And they have an issue there, and how do they sort of best cope with getting more vitamin D?
Quite easily, they take a supplement by mouth.
Yeah.
The need to cover up the pale parts of the vitiligo with sunblock cream during the summer months. But they cannot rely on their skin to produce enough vitamin D.
Thank you.
We don't need to get sunburnt. People with vitiligo can get terribly sunburnt. So don't rely on the sun. Just take capsules by mouth.
Okay. A question was asked here. Does taking a statin stop conversion of vitamin D via sunlight?
No.
Nice and sweet answer.
No. No, it doesn't. It's surprising that it doesn't in some respects, because the precursor of vitamin D, 78C, and going much back in the metabolic chain, is blocked by statins, and we would expect statins to result in vitamin D deficiency, but it appears that they don't. And it was put to me that the reason is that statins do not get into the skin.
Why is it that certain ethnicities are more prone to vitamin D deficiency? I mean, I'm talking about the UK here, and you know, is and due to low levels of immunity.
Well, there are two parts of it really. It's dark skin and it's covering the skin as well.
Mm,
If some people have are quite upset about covering up their bodies with clothing and hair as well. The group that fared worst of all in the COVID pandemic were the Haredi Jews, the ultra-Orthodox Jews. And if you see them, the women wear long clothes, thick tights, hats, wigs. The men wear big hats, big beards, dark clothes. They're not going to walk around in shorts or a little bit of a top at all, and they cover up their skin obsessively. And it's the same in Israel. And there's a huge amount of vitamin D deficiency in the ultra Orthodox Jews living in Israel. That research has been done.
thank
But
you.
people like yourself have a dark skin, and you've got a big reduction in the amount of you can produce vitamin D, of course you can, but it takes you longer to do so than somebody like myself with a white skin.
Yeah. A question was asked by Helen, who's talking about in the 60s and 70s, we didn't burn in the sun. Do you think seed oils are responsible for us burning more easily?
No, it's the atmosphere. It's the clean atmosphere now. In the 1960s, there's a huge amount of atmospheric pollution. It was worse in the 1950s in this country. It was terrible. It's like in Delhi today. Delhi, I think, has the most heavily polluted atmosphere in the world. And I was in Delhi a few years ago, about 6 years ago, and I couldn't believe the amount of pollution in the atmosphere. And I remember it when I was young in living in Manchester, that the atmospheric pollution in the wintertime and in the summertime was dreadful because it was all burning coal. Everywhere was burning coal. And so we didn't get much sun intensity at all.
So I'm going to sort of call an end to proceedings here. I think we've gone through most of the questions, and I suppose in summary, Dr. Grimes, what you're saying is get your vitamin D levels tested, get them tested regularly, and get measured, and make sure you're in the ideal range.
Yes,
That's the key message here, isn't it?
it is.
And take things into your own hands. Don't rely on other people to tell you what. Just get them measured and make sure at the right levels.
You're likely to know more about the subject than your family doctor.
Yeah.
The ignorance about vitamin D among family doctors is frightening.
Yes.
Yeah. George wants me to share my email address. I
Yes.
should have put it up.
What we can do, if you can put up on the screen, or maybe I could do that quite quickly. Or Davina, have you got the address?
Yeah. I'll just copy it
Would
from
you
the
press it
email.
up,
Just a minute.
and while you're
Yeah.
doing that, I'm sort of.
I was going to say also the daily dose is important. Everyone should be taking some every day. And if you've got a cold or something, you should be increasing the levels to make sure that your levels are up. Because I was very deficient. It took me 7 weeks. And then I kept taking a daily dose and then it went up to 100. So that was good.
Wonderful.
They have stopped doing the testing. My doctor said they're not doing the testing now because they're expecting everyone to be deficient, so they're not. That's what they've been told not to test, which is ridiculous. Because
I understand what he says there, but what
yeah,
you've got to do is like in this heart study from Salt Lake City published this week. They've got to make sure your doctor's got to make sure your blood level gets up above 100, up into 100, 150 range. That's why you need to do the vitamin D testing. You don't do the vitamin D testing now necessarily because you know you're going to be deficient unless you're taking vitamin D. But when you start vitamin D, wait for 3 months, 6 months, then do the blood test to see if you reach that target range. It's just like when you're treating diabetes or something, you've got to make sure you get into the range that is required.
Do GPs can we get vitamin D on prescription? Can your GP prescribe that so you can?
They
So it
can,
makes the
but
cost a bit cheaper.
it's so cheap that you just buy it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Because
It costs about 10, 20 pounds for a year's supply.
oh, okay, that's brilliant.
Get it from Amazon.
Okay, are they? Someone asked the question. Are there any brands that you promote? We don't promote brands on this
No,
channel, but
the
is
brands
it?
are all the same.
They're all the same, right?
You get it
So
all from the same place. Now,
yeah.
when you see a capsule of vitamin D or a tablet of vitamin D, they're all the same size. You get 400 units, 4,000 units, 20,000 units, and they're all the same size capsule because they all contain olive oil with a tiny bit of vitamin D in it. But the amount of vitamin D is so tiny that you couldn't make your capsule small enough, basically.
Interesting. So look, Dr. Grimes' email's gone up on the chat. So please take note of it. davidgrimes1@mac.com.
That's it.
Uh, and
He's got a website as well. Do you want
yeah,
me to put that in?
would you mind? Would you mind,
Yeah,
please?
I'll just do that quickly.
Lots of useful information. The what we found, Dr. Grimes, and generally with as people are aging, they spend less on their health, and we've talked about that in the context of eye health,
Yeah.
oral health, and we're encouraging people. That's the bit you should be spending money on. I know when times are hard and you've got to
Yes.
spend a bit of money. So message again with vitamin D. It doesn't cost as much, but it sort of protects you from and builds up your immune system. So please invest in that.
And it will increase your chance of reaching the age of 100.
Yeah, definitely. And this sort of nice sort of leads us on to next week's seminar, which is on cardiovascular disease, actually. And we've got a fantastic team led by Dr. Holly Young from Imperial College of London, and she's got her colleagues joining us. So we're going to be talking about cardiovascular disease and prevention of the disease. So you gave us a lot of background today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it next week as well. And we'll sort of have
I
vitamin D.
think you should join the call.
So yeah, thank you so much on behalf of everyone that's on this call. There's you've maxed out our number of users today. We hit 100 people, so thank you very much for that. I think we'd love to have you back on again at some future stage. So that would be great. So
Yeah.
thank you on behalf of GAA and the rest of the participants. I think the feedback's been overwhelmingly that you've done a fantastic job, and we really enjoyed your presentation. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Thank
All
you.
about living to the age of 100, dying ultimately of old age at that time. And that's how
Can
to
I
do
just
it. Keep
can I
taking
just
the
ask about
tablet.
can I just ask you about your PDF? Can you send that to me and then I can post it here? Shall I do that now or
A PDF of what? Of this
of your
presentation?
book?
No, it's your book that
No,
you
of
Of
your
my
wrote.
book.
book.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit of a complicated one.
Oh, is it? Okay, no
But,
worries.
I can send it to you, but it's a series of PDFs.
Okay.
And I'd rather not do it that way. Let people send me a request for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
And I
fine.
don't want you to burden the organization of it because it's in about 14 parts. And
Oh
that's
wow.
it's a big book, 14-part PDF. But I will send you a PDF of a book I've written, a paper I've written recently about about the health disadvantages of South Asian ethnicity and how those are all attributed not to racism but to or Black African South Asian ethnicity, not racism, but it's all about vitamin D deficiency, and it's an interesting one. I'll send that to you.
That would be great. And Dr. Holmes, is the sort of medical world talking to the powers that be to change the way they report, um, deaths and mortalities, etc., so they make it so ethnicity is sort of recorded,
Yeah,
or is that
no,
never going to happen?
it's not. It's not going to happen. I don't think. No, no.
Right. Okay.
I think Dr. Grimes was part of a big group of doctors that
Yes.
protested to the government,
Yeah.
and it was just ignored.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the government advice is just ignore it. Quite honestly.
Really, but it'd be interesting because if they did, then at least you could direct some of the research towards that, couldn't you?
Exactly. Yeah. But the problem is most research, medical research, is funded and directed by the pharmaceutical industry. That's the big weakness at the moment.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, we live and we learn, and thank you for educating
We
us
do.
today.
Okay.
these sessions, someone's asked, are these recorded? Yes, they're recorded. GAA London has a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Please subscribe to it. I've added in Dr. Grimes' website again for people to contact him.
Yeah, fine.
So with that, I think we'll call it a day.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'll be happy to return anytime.
Thank you so much.
All the best now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Davina. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Davina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.